What's something you suspect but can't prove? Story 1. Trump spent 4 years claiming the 2020 election was stolen, so he could spend 4 years investigating how to steal the 2024 election, and fudge nailed it. Story 2. That my students have not all left their homework on the kitchen table, but in fact never even started the assignment. Story 3. That we are solely little game pieces for the elites, and that things like wars and other clashes or conundrums that just have us scratching our heads are instigated purely for their entertainment. Story 4. That the Epstein videos are not simple intimacy tapes involving underage children. Epstein received billions of dollars from the people he was blackmailing. It makes no sense. Even if it was statutory violation, many public figures have overcome that kind of thing. I am thinking that they are snuff videos. There is no statute of limitations for takedown. A snuff video could land even a billionaire in prison for life. This is the only thing that makes sense of why those videos have so much leverage on the subjects. I sincerely hope that I am wrong. Answer. Have you seen the video about why snuff movies do not exist? In short, officially, they do not exist because the government choose a definition impossible to meet. That way you can't be condemned for it. Definition can be as issue. A pornographic film that shows an actual takedown of one of the performers, being produced for profit or financial gain, in wide release. So you have mandatory adult content, takedown, produced for profit, wide release. The last one exclude everything. And the real most correct definition, seeing video of someone being eliminated on purpose for the video. That way you exclude accidents but include all the others. All. Story 5. The increase in autism in the population is not just a tendency to overdiagnose, but the result of substances, chemical, and environmental pollution in the food supply that is consumed by the mother, especially growth hormones and veterinary substances in livestock. Story 6. My ex's new boyfriend is stalking me. He made a profile to comment on my stuff and then deleted it. He also keeps calling me from no caller ID numbers. Super weird. Story 7. I suspect that we are in a simulation and that when we date, it's just our actual body taking off the visor that induces a simulation. It's also why our concept of a time at wind is weird. Time flying, time crawling, years seeming to go by fast, etc. Answer. My dad used to say he believed we were all in hell. When we die, that is our soul finally finding redemption or learning from whatever mistakes landed us in hell in the first place and moving on to whatever the opposite of hell is. He could never fathom if there was a God why we were all suffering and having hardships and etc. The only logical explanation was that we were already in hell. Otherwise, why would God allow us to continue suffering? Story 8. I just partied too hard 3 hours of my day, 1/8 of a holiday from work. Scrolling Reddit. Oh, you're wedded, which indicates I need to get a life. Story 9. Project 2025 and Doge being just a way to gut the government to fund the tech oligarchy. Everybody sees it, but we can't prove it. Story 10. Lizards and snakes can love and bond with humans. I've researched this multiple times and I'm always wrong, but I still can't shake the feeling. Story 11. My state government electricity power supplier cuts power in certain suburbs when the power demand is too high. Normally, this is when there is extreme heat, as my city has a hot climate. I suspect the state governed only cuts the power in safe seats for them, not those that are marginal or opposition supporting. Story 12. When I was in high school, 3 of my good friends had parents that taught in the same district, but not in the HS we went to. I knew I was smarter than all of them, but for some reason they always got much higher grades than I ever did, and many times in the same class as me. I had a feeling the teachers knew these kids, parent were a teacher, and gave them better grades. Story 13. NHS senior management uses poorly thought-out policy to prevent GPs from referring people to specialists in an attempt to keep waiting times down so the numbers don't look so bad in their annual report. And also, people are straight up dying from preventable conditions because of it. Story 14. That exhaust fumes are causing more of a health concern than we think. Start your car in the garage? No. Sit in bumper-to-bumper traffic for miles? Sure. Story 15. There seems to be a link between gay men and male pattern baldness. I can't prove it, and I can't find any research on it. Story 16. I suspect that there is a higher power manipulating the media by creating faction and pit them against each others. Nothing is the truth at all. Story 17. A person I know got heavy into day trading, made some good money, and started a financial planning firm. I think it was a type of hedge fund thing. Anyway, he would brag about everything constantly. His Bitcoin, his crypto, how he knew more about stocks than surgeons knew about surgery. He's not an educated man by any means, just a typical bro who spent most of his time at the gym, roiding up, and of course trading. Then one day he stopped posting altogether. The quiet was nice. No constant stories about some big win. About a month later, his home burns down. Like big house burned to the foundation. Sob stories about how he lost his home, all that. Then he moves across the country, starts a contracting business. He doesn't have any news of any arrests or anything, but I think that he over-leveraged himself or got caught up in losing a lot and basically ran out of money. He panicked and had his home torched to collect the insurance, since selling his home would have been challenging during the pandemic. Extremely large homes, even in hot markets, don't sell as quickly, nor do they go for asking price or higher. So I think he torched it, got paid, and then moved himself across the... Story 18. I believe aliens saw the USA's messages that they sent into space. You know the messages I mean. Of peace, cooperation, and benevolence for all mankind. They made the efforts to find us, only to discover that not only was it just a steaming pile of lies, but they were horrified at the dislike, gleeful, prideful way in which the USA desecrates the promise. I think that's why the drones are here, because the promise wasn't just broken, it was violated with malevolence. Story 19. 1. The stock market cheats, lies, and denies the reality of the economy. The stock market behaves at the opposite of the reality currently, and this is alarming, but no one bat an eye. The movie The Big Short showed this already. 2. The inflation rate is a lie. The current inflation is way worse than reported, and they lie about it to protect the stock market, especially in the countries that raise automatically the minimum wage on inflation. Story 20. That religions are just cults that grew to a large enough scale to exert power of the populations of the world. Because it's been proven for centuries by now. Story 21. That Luigi didn't eliminate the CEO. The real killer got away. They selected from a list of people with online histories that would make them look like a potential killer. When they announced they found a bag of Monopoly money in Central Park, they actually found the real evidence. When they picked up Luigi, they planted the evidence on him so it would stick. It was gaining way too much positive attention. If the killer actually got away, and they never convicted anyone, it would have absolutely inspired way more copycats than it undoubtedly already has. I think he was framed to protect the world elites. Story 22. YouTube has a secret timer in the background, separate from video watch time that they use to show you ads. Sometimes I'll pause a video right after an ad plays and come back 15 minutes later, only for another ad to immediately start. Story 23. I suspect that autism is the next form of human evolution. How can autism affect 70% of the population? People say the diagnostic tools are better. That's BS. Can our species really be bombarded by a condition that isn't for our species' betterment? I mean, 90% of the autistic humans are savant brilliant in a way, and a majority are self-sufficient. And social ineptitude is one of our biggest problems and obstacles, and autistic kids seem to block that out. Makes me think every day I see an odd human. Story 24. I am pretty sure the friend's daughter that my dad had stay with us for a year was actually my half-sister. 1, she looks more like him than I do, and 2, he was adamant that I do not fudge her, bearing in mind that my dad usually encouraged me to fudge as many women as I possibly could. Story 25. Cryptocurrency has nothing to do with actual money. It's fully tracked, and because cash is hard to track, it's also decoding something. Imagine you are a shady organization that needs to break some cryptography. How do you get enough power and CPU cycles to break it without anyone knowing? Release a fake currency that isn't actually backed by anything. You can then feed the crypto brute force attacks, releasing a coin when a goal is met. Keep doing it till you have broken the encryption. And since it's reported on the chain, you now have a key, and wash and repeat. Bitcoin is a terrible currency. It can't be replenished, has a finite number, lots of coins already lost, and it constantly goes up in value but has no real world thing behind it. Transactions are announced. So yeah, cryptocurrency is a scam. Answer: cryptocurrency is a scam. This has been known to anyone with any sense of computer financial literacy for a while. It's an overly rigid, slow, power-hungry solution looking for a problem. 95% of crypto is some form of pump and dump, get-rich-quick scheme that only has value because people put money into it. The other 5% are trying to solve some real-world problem in a worse way than currently done. NFTs, smart contracts, ledgers, etc. Story 26. I actually think JWB was right about WMD in Iraq. There is conclusive proof that Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons on civilians in the 80s as well as in the Iraq-Iran war. My theory is that as the U.S. prepared to invade in the original Gulf War, the Iraqis forward deployed a bunch of their chemical and possibly bioartillery shells near the front lines for use against coalition troops. But the air offensive was so massive that those weapons were all destroyed in the airstrikes. This would explain the lack of weapons found after the 2003 invasion, contrary to the well-published WMD program of the 80s-90s. I also think that Gulf War syndrome is a combination of exposure to the oil fires, but also to low concentrations of chemical agents being dispersed from those stockpiles being destroyed. There were reports of chemical weapon detectors going off at the time in the Gulf War, even though chemical weapons weren't used. Story 27. I think that Putin has both financial compromise on Donald Trump, but he also has video of Trump having intimacy with clearly underage girls who look like Ivanka. Story 28. That rage bait for engagement is actively damaging our brain societies. Making people constantly mad about small, dumb things makes us less kind, patient with each other, and too worn out to care about more serious issues. I don't think this is a massive conspiracy. I think shoot people just love to use this as a tactic, and this is the impact. Story 29. People of different colors cross the street, different on average. It's just something I've noticed, but it sounds wildly racist to actually say out loud. Story 30. Mercury was once Earth, and it's small because it's been on fire for a longer time than Venus, which is the same size as Earth, and Mars has ice caps while Jupiter's gases are concentrating. Story 31. That voters in North Carolina didn't actually go for Trump and that the machine counts were manipulated. The state went with a Democratic governor and AG, and I just don't buy that the top two state positions were blue, but then everyone went red for president. Story 32. COVID exacerbated my genetic predisposition to diabetes, causing me to develop type 2 diabetes at 30 years old. I'm 210, 5'7", and walk to work daily, along with regularly hiking 3 to 6 sizable hikes per month before diagnosis. I kept a standard American diet, which is to say probably way more cholesterol, sodium, and sugar than necessary, and probably a bad idea for me, but not excessive by any means. My father and grandfather had no symptoms or diagnosis until their 50s. It doesn't add up. I know genetics are tricky. It's not always a means of great prediction, but 20 years outside the average is just insane. Story 33. Someone in the U.S. Department of Ed was related to the CEO of smartboards. In the late 2000s, early 2010s, all of a sudden, school districts around the country massively overinvested in this tech. The only problem was no one taught anyone how to use them, and they either didn't work or were never used to their full potential. Someone made a bunch of money on a product that was never fully utilized and arguably never really needed. Story 34. A few things altered. 1. U.S. consular officers are under pressure from their superiors to deny a certain percentage of visa applications from disliked countries like Iran. Regardless of how many applicants in a given day meet the criteria to be granted a visa, basically proving that they are not a terrorist, plan to visit, then return to their country without motive to remain in the U.S. illegally, a certain percentage of applicants must be rejected. Otherwise, the consular officer will risk losing their job. If we look at NIV refusal rates by country, we find a slight correlation with GDP per capita in the broader sense. But if we break it down by income grouping, we find that among middle-income countries, refusal rates vary wildly, and it's often correlated to that country's political relationship with the U.S. 2. Police in U.S. states that ban ticket arrest quotas, for example, California, still have informal quotas they need to fulfill. These quotas are not enumerated to the officers, but they will receive a negative performance evaluation if they aren't writing as many tickets as the police agency, for example, the California Highway Patrol, wants them to write. 3. Israel threatens journalists Russian style to get them to retract true reporting on Israeli crimes. 4. Corporate interests often block efforts to make infrastructure safer because they profit off of people's suffering. More car accidents, more business for collision, repair shops, injury lawyers, car dealers, and car rental companies. The insurance companies aren't hurt by this because they just raise premiums across the board to compensate. Having driven in the USA, Canada, and Mexico, I find that road design is worst in Mexico and best in Canada, with the U.S. a decent bit better than Mexico, but still incorporating more dangerous designs relative to Canada. The other day, I was driving in San Francisco and almost got crushed by a semi because our lanes, coming from two separate highways merging into one, suddenly merge into a single lane with no warning or directive for one side to yield to the other. I have never seen such a design in any of the 3 Canadian provinces I've driven in. Story 35. United 93 was shot down. They pushed this passengers gallantly fought back narrative to give the public something good to believe in. The truth might be that after the NY and the Pentagon, the government knew that UA-93 was going to eliminate a lot more people, maybe even strike the White House. Shooting it down was the difficult but right choice to make. Story 36. Most people are absolute idiots. It's just that on the internet, you get to choose what to talk about and you get infinite time to respond, so you can think of what to say properly before you say it. And also, most people who don't use the internet as much don't understand many things like mental health, biological health, useless but fun knowledge such as space, etc. And naturally, there's a lot of Karens in the wild. Story 37. Back when the internet was fun, there was a site called the World Question Center. Maybe it still exists in some form. This very question was asked. The answer that stuck with me was something like, I believe people gain an evolutionary advantage by believing in things they cannot prove. Story 38. That my grandmother molested my brother, my male cousins, and I think my uncle, her son. I'm like 91, sure. Story 39. I think Ann Coulter fudge horses. She just seems like the sort of person who would do that. Oh, sure, she'll deny it if you ask her. I'm sure she'd say nay. Story 40. Most posts on the Peter Explain the Joke subreddit are bots for training AI on how to recognize meme humor. Story 41. Microplastics, which have been found in sperm cells, and if they are in sperm, are likely in eggs too, are contributing to the increase in children with neurodivergence and developmental delays. Story 42. I suspect that every clergyman of every faith knows the God thing is just a means of making money. None of them take it as a real thing. It's a way to earn a living, basically doing nothing. Story 43. The bird flu is infecting people, and not just birds. Almost everyone I know has had flu symptoms in the last month. The current administration doesn't want another COVID-19, so they just aren't telling us. Story 44. My autistic toddler is smarter than he lets on. How come every time I feel confident enough with him to let my guard down for half a split second, he manages to run off or cause trouble? Story 45. It is possible for humans to be biologically immortal. It's just insanely far out of the realm of our scientific knowledge to a point where it will be generations upon generations before any breakthroughs are made. Story 46. There is something that follows me from place to place that I've lived in. It hides my things. I've learned through the years to ask out loud if I can please have them back. Once I leave the room for a little while, when I go back in, I instantly find it usually in a place I already looked before or just sitting in a very obvious place like on my bed. I don't mention this to anyone IRL because it makes me look crazy as Fudge Mayo. Answer? You're not alone, Lowell. Just happened tonight with the case of tomatoes. Laugh it off, congratulate whatever it is for being clever, and ask for it back. Come out of the bathroom 5 minutes later, and they're sitting on the counter, on the cutting board that I was chopping lettuce on before I started looking for the tomatoes. Stuff like this happens every few days, at least once a week. Story 47. Some of the apps on our smartphones are recording our conversations even when they're supposedly closed. Question is which ones? Definitely Google. Story 48. I suspect there is a gyro sensor in my YouTube app, which causes ads to happen more frequently when my iPhone is moving. Every time I am done with my meal and put my phone in my pocket, I get more ads. Story 49. I think the soundtrack for Tron Legacy was mostly made by Hans Zimmer or one of his associates instead of Daft Punk. It was more of a cooperation for marketing purposes. Daft Punk surely made the tracks, Endo of Line and Derezed, but the rest like Outland sound much like Hans Zimmer to me, with maybe some little input by Daft Punk. I am a big soundtrack score fan in general and can identify a lot of composers by their style, and it rings the Hans Zimmer bell for me when I listen to that album. Story 50. I'm convinced that our dogs don't even really like me and only accept me as a tolerable substitute when my wife is unavailable. Story 51. Switzerland secretly dominates the world. Call me crazy, but the United Nations are fully controlled from there, and they have been sabotaging other countries for almost a century. Story 52. Epstein didn't eliminate himself, but there was a safe full of guys fudge underage kids that disappeared with Bill Barr. Story 53. Kendrick Lamar has been propped up by UMG, Drake's label, to try and take him down. Drake was due for another contact soon, and they did this to negotiate a better price by tearing his value down. UMG boosted, not like us, with streams, media, press, etc. I would be listening to county stations mixed and that song would pop up. Jay-Z got Kendrick the Super Bowl as well as all these Grammys. Other song artists were way more deserving. He did this for Beyonce too, shocker. This whole pedo angle is a lie and has been advertised everywhere when there is literally no proof he's not on trial. He's not under investigation. It's just a teardown. Funny enough, Kendrick's main business partners are Jay-Z, who groomed Beyonce since, 15? Not to mention this recent domestic case that was swept under the rug. Oh, and also Dr. Dre, who has had numerous issues in the past. Look him up. It was pretty much proven in my eyes based off the fact the CEO of UMG, Lucian Grange, was high-fiving Jay-Z or Dre when Kendrick won Song of the Year, a diss song solely off the back of Another Man, at the Grammys. Kendrick's Super Bowl performance has finally started to open people's eyes on what's actually going on. He didn't perform his best songs. It was all about Drake, whether it was calling him by name, teasing Not Like Us, the whole performance, bringing two of Drake's exes in Sessa and Serena. Record labels are gross. Story 54. That all the microplastics in our food body are causing and/or enhancing all sorts of health issues. Autism, gender dysphoria, mental health, depression, etc., making existing issues worse, etc., etc. Story 55. That most CEOs aren't actually very good or smart. They can just chat LinkedIn-style nonsense fluently. Story 56. People want to believe autism is caused by anything other than long-term genetic factors because it's much more comforting to believe it's somehow something they can control without grappling. That undiagnosed mental illness has been an enormous aspect of daily life, basically since there were people. Autism may also represent a fluid kind of neurodivergence that is as commonplace throughout human existence and provide a strong non-negative binary to normal neurological states. I think it puts old-school fears of replacement and changeling syndrome into people's minds. I think large chunks of the elites believe now is the time to fully commit to technocratic rule, and you will see democratic states becoming extinct in the coming future as fully corporate and technological entities replace them. I think the worst part is that these people may genuinely believe they are doing good work and that it's completely necessary to save us. No conspiracy, no dislike, just people who typically are as dumb as you and I, but with more resources than we can imagine. I think the universe is empty because something or someone is eliminate all life in the cradle. I just have this instinct about it, that the universe is clashing droves of wars, fought where one side is eliminate everything else when it's soup in a pond, because that's the only way to ensure you make it. Blowing up stars to irradiate potentially habitable stellar nurseries, use ancient probes to monitor worlds to drop asteroids. The silence is engineered. It only seems perfect and a paradox because the distances are so huge and life's so rare already that even just that one civilization that survives and expands ends up dying out either by conflict, self-immolation, or natural causes before ever really getting any attention. We are making too much noise. Story 57. That the votes in the last election were actually rigged. I want to believe this, as the alternative is much too disturbing. Story 58. People are able to and cause a conditioning or self-hypnosis on themselves with ease. Maybe it's just me, because I am a bit naive and easy to persuade, but I believe that people do not realize how quick that can happen. Especially thanks to the input of social media and algorithms, you can suddenly be convinced to like or think something specific. Either that or I am going crazy. Story 59. Insects are dying en masse because of some recently introduced pesticides, and chemical companies know what's the cause. Story 60. Environmental factors like exhaust, products in our homes, etc., is causing more health problems than we realize or are willing to acknowledge. Answer: I was feeling kind of rough one winter, frequent irritated eyes, regular vague GI discomfort, low mood. I thought allergies, not enough vitamin D, depression. Turns out my natural gas heater wasn't burning cleanly enough and the exhaust was not optimal. It wasn't enough to set off the carbon monoxide detector, but it was poisoning me. The day I got the heater serviced and recalibrated, all the symptoms stopped. Story 61. The Disney movie Treasure Planet was sabotaged to flop to prove to shareholders that audiences were done with traditional animation and were ready to embrace total CG as the default. Later on, I truly believe that Disney did this again and kneecapped John Carter's chances at the box office. See, Disney had been trying to lock down the male 5 to 13-year-old demographic. Pirates of the Caribbean was a great success, but it only had so much shelf life. Do young boys like Tron? Not enough, apparently. How about the Lone Ranger? No? Well, here comes John Carter, no doubt pitched as Disney's answer to Star Wars. And then someone had the bright idea after crunching the numbers to just buy Lucasfilm outright. But if John Carter was a hit, it would definitely nix or at least delay their plans to pursue Lucasfilm. So they sabotaged the marketing, let John Carter flop, and prove to shareholders that Disney simply cannot under any circumstances crack the live-action appeal of the young male demographic. So why not buy a brand with plenty of built-in and long-lasting appeal? Story 62. that humans aren't at the forefront of life on Earth. We just like to think intelligence makes us better than every other animal. I think there is no best evolutionary strategy. Every species alive today is alive because it got born with the right stuff. If we set off all our nukes, some species will live on, but it sure as hell won't be us, so we can't be that great. Story 63. Aliens exist and are not only disappointed in us, but have little faith that we can get our act together in time to join them before we eliminate ourselves. Story 64. That posting content on the Instagram directly helps content perform better than scheduling it and then making it go live. I mean, the platform wants you to use it more, right? Story 65. Not a suspect, but a guarantee. Just have to wait for it. I'm convinced that the average U.S. North American continental, at the very least lifespan, is going to drop down to easily early mid-60s by the time Gen Z and younger generations hit that age. And I have zero problem believing it's largely due to COVID. People who had genetic sensitivities to things like cardiac or other thoracic respiratory conditions, like MKS, POTS, etc., that people my age, including myself, and I'm only 20 this year, are drastically developing this issues in droves. Add on top of that the fact that we can't actually prove if microplastics in humans have any real impact on our biological systems because we can't find a control group. Let me repeat myself here. We literally cannot locate a group of people lacking these microplastics to do sufficient research on its impacts. Rising cancer rates in younger groups and the increasing lack of literacy and access to education. Weakened immune systems, add on a foreign substance in the body that we don't know what it'll do, and a lack of resources teaching you to be properly informed and well-versed on your body is going to lead directly to large numbers of natural deaths that would have been otherwise preventable. This isn't even factoring in the amount of people who will have severe problems developing but won't go to their PCP, if they even have one, because of fears that insurance won't cover a standard CBC differential blood test. Including the fact that primarily American, easily accessible food is absolute garbage, and that garbage is normally the more affordable stuff. You think parents of 7-year-olds are feeding their kids chips and pure sugar 247 because they want to? I can keep going. Unfortunately for us Gen Z, and later we're the guinea pigs. History likes to do this funny little thing where everything that is claimed to be perfectly fine and safe at first just means you have to wait till the impacts happen later. We are going to be that later. Story 66. Mental health lives in our gut biome, and everything can be healed or prevented by food, and our food system is keeping us sick to farm profit for big pharma. Story 67. That Elon Musk tampered with the vote-counting machines in Pennsylvania to steal the 2024 election for Trump. Story 68. With the discovery of quantum receptors or microtubules in brain neurons, human consciousness is a collection or field of particles interacting with each other. Also totally a stretch, but mother's instinct could come from some quantum entanglement of particles passed down through pregnancy in their child's neurons and only manifests in moments of extreme emotions, ESP, fear, anxiety. Last part is probably a total perversion of our current scientific understanding, but hey, something fun to think about. Story 69. More Japanese swords have been made for selling in anime conventions worldwide than during Japan's entire military history. Story 70. When using your phone, YouTube will give you an ad if you look away. I swear to God, it'll watch 10-15 minutes of content without an ad. The second I turn my face away from my phone, I get an ad. It happens far too often to be a coincidence. Story 71. Social media poisoned the societal well starting in 2014 or so, and within 10 years we will consider it as addictive and problematic for health outcomes as tobacco or adult beverage. Story 72. Luigi is innocent, and I don't mean Luigi did a public service and should be free on that basis. I just don't believe he did it. Story 73. This technology was involved in the DC helicopter crash, was due for rollout in 2025, but I can't prove that it was installed on PA-25. The NTSB would be able to, though. Story 74. That we're being listened to through our cell phones. I will literally be talking about something out loud to my wife. Then after we're done talking, I'll hop on Google for some random reason, and in the search bar will be an almost identical search for what we were just talking about. Also, I've had ads pop up after conversating that will be about what we were talking about. Story 75. Time is a field that exists around us, and we all feel it similarly. If a week feels particularly long, it usually does for those around me too. Everyone's concept of time was warped during lockdown. I think we experience time the same as everyone else, but it fluctuates as opposed to time feeling different to everyone at the same moment. Story 76. Not saying I believe this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were true. In Major League sports, officials are implicitly encouraged to subtly make calls advantageous to popular teams in larger media markets so that those teams make it to the playoffs, ensuring larger numbers of viewers in the postseason. Story 77. A company that I know doesn't intend to hire good engineers, so they would not question what the management wants to do, or rather, they hire someone that gets shoot done and not care about the consequences of their action. The management doesn't make good long-term decisions. Story 78. Sweden rigged the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest. There was a clear popular vote winner, Cha-Cha-Cha, with such a margin that the crowd in the stadium was chanting it as the votes were announced. But 2024 was the 50th anniversary of ABBA's big win, so Sweden wanted to host. The votes were manipulated to make that happen. I'm not saying Sweden tricked everyone. I think the council behind Eurovision simply predetermined the winner that year. But I'm still pissed. Cha-Cha-Cha deserved that win. Story 79. Since iPhone came out with more advanced satellite connections last fall, U.S. cellular companies extended their cellular signal reach of 1 bar to keep you on their networks. This 1 bar does not transmit data, just keeps you connected enough to prevent you from using satellite services, which require you to be without any cellular reception at all. Story 80. That we are all currently living a simulation. Everything is just so weird. It used to be so normal. No way to prove it, but I'm pretty sure that's where we are. Answer, the question isn't directly, are we in a simulation, really? It's, do you think humans have the capacity to build a simulation given enough time? Whether or not we destroy ourselves beforehand, a meteor hits us, virus outbreak, etc. doesn't matter. The question is simply, with enough time, do you think we'd eventually have breakthrough after breakthrough and the raw materials required to make a simulation? If your answer is yes, then you really don't have a choice but to believe that we're in a simulation. Because statistically, if we build a simulation, then that simulation is in another simulation and so on. Statistically, zero chance we'd make the first simulation. First step is making an indistinguishable mind from a human by way of computing and plopping into a humanoid robot for effect. Now think about how we aren't remotely close to the computational power for one humanoid robot. A full-scale universe simulation would take trillions and trillions more computational power than that. It's a lot less certain of a yes when you think about that. Story 81. Jay-Z is a time-traveling vampire. I know he is because Beyonce told in a dream once. Been advocating for this ever since. Story 82. That most skincare products are designed to relieve one problem and cause another. The skincare companies don't profit off of us having good skin. Story 83. We all see colors differently, but can't tell because we are taught to call the colors we see the same thing. But I think colors look different depending on your eye color structure. One person's red may actually be another person's blue, but we all just call it red. Answer, yes. I argued this in one of my law classes where we had to present something that sounded completely false and prove it to be true by the end of class. I argued that the sky is pink. I won. Long story short, we are born with color receptors in our eyes, but the way our brain processes those signals from the color receptors can differ from person to person. If you think of it like computer code, my brain code for blue could be 0,000. Your blue code could be 001. If you and I were to switch eyes, my brain is now processing 001 when I look at something blue, and your brain is now processing 0,000 when you look at something blue. But here's the kicker, when I had my original set of eyes, 001 was pink to my brain. So now when I look through your eyes, my brain processes the sky and anything else blue as being pink. Therefore, the sky is pink. So if the sky is pink to some people, why do they still believe the sky is blue? Because we're taught at an early age that when we look at the sky, that's the color called blue. When we look at a banana, that color is called yellow, and etc. That doesn't mean that we each see blue or yellow or etc. when we look at the same item. We are simply taught that what our brain is processing is called blue or yellow or etc. Story 84. That not many, but rather the vast majority of men have sociopathic traits. Most men lie and are very good at it, but women wave it away as men just being not as socially attuned, and men understand that intimacy violence is bad, but they simply don't care. The Giselle Pellicott case. The discovery of Telegram violation chats. The high rates of child brides and intimacy trafficking globally. How men behave in times in war when the threat of legal consequences is tossed to the wind. And then in addition to how many gay men and heterosexual, bisexual women have just disclosed personal horror stories to me. It's firmly shifted my perspective. I think most men are sociopaths or have sociopathic traits, and true empathy in men is very rare. And I think the vast majority of women are entirely blind to their husbands and boyfriends, not being an exception to this. Ladies, men are just as emotionally and socially intelligent as you are. They are not stupid. Men are not stupid. They are very smart. They simply do not care. Their moral bar is not where yours is. Story 85. In HS 2002-ish, me and a friend of mine found a program called NeoTrace, which would take an IP address and show you where on a map that IP address was located. It could also do trace routes to show you what routers your data went through en route to any given IP address. After messing around with it, we noticed that almost everything we pinged went through Puerto Rico. It was really weird. At the time, we joked that it was the government collecting all our internet activities and whatnot. Fast forward to roughly 5 years ago, and having totally forgotten about that, I see an article on Google News titled something like, Report, Post 911, NSA collected internet activity of U.S. citizens at secret facility in Puerto Rico. Blew my mind. I closed the article, and then about a year later, I mentioned it to a friend and tried to find the article on Google. I could not find a goddarn thing and still can't. The closest thing I can find is this article that reports that the NSA was running an espionage operation for Latin America out of a naval base in PR. Centro de Periodismo Investigativo, Puerto Rico, mentioned as part of NSA spying revealed by Snowden. Centro de Periodismo Investigativo. Story 86. I have a theory that working from home, although super comfy, is eliminate us as society much more than we think it is. Story 87. I'm fairly sure that my family is hiding a secret that my uncle is really my aunt's kid, and grandma raised him as hers. He was born around 1950, but I don't remember his actual birth year. Uncle is 16 years younger. Aunt spent a semester away right before Uncle was born. It was common to send girls away to unwed mothers' homes for their pregnancies at that time. Grandma carried all of her weight into the tummy, so faking a pregnancy would be easy. Family denies it. But Grandma and Aunt are gone, so I can't ask them. Uncle looks a little different than his siblings. Sharper features, narrower face. Story 88. The screen is more sensitive for ads on Reddit than for posts. I'm not a programmer, and I don't even know if this is possible, but it seems like anything I accidentally open on Reddit is always an ad. Answer, wow. I never really thought of this as a conspiracy, but I've seen this happen so many times and never put it together. Either it'll be scrolling through and somehow my phone magically lags around an ad and senses my touch, or I'll be hovering over something and I know beyond a doubt my thumb isn't touching the screen and it somehow opens an ad. So many times I'll be reading something with my thumb hovering over the screen and it suddenly opens an ad or some other shoot. I know what touching my screen feels like. I know what my phone vibration sensor feels like, and it never activates or gives me any sensation that I tapped something. It just straight up loads a clickable ad that I'm near, even though I haven't pressed on it, and my thumb isn't even near it. It's like the clickable hitbox is way larger. Freaking infuriating. Story 89. Apple made their wired headphones longer when they released AirPods so that the wires caught on more things, thus demonstrating the need for wireless headphones. Answer, can prove that Dyson made the cord on their corded vacuum cleaners shorter and shorter before releasing a cordless one with an advertising campaign about how frustrating it was having a cord that wouldn't reach far enough. How? Work for a museum, and we have one of every Dyson produced, was then confirmed by an ex-Dyson employee who came to work for us. Story 90. Songs on the radio are slightly sped up or slowed down. Can't prove this, but I swear some songs sound faster. Story 91. My whole family, especially my mom, is completely convinced that state politician who was active in the 90s a hit out on a girl my mom went to high school with. There was a huge cheating and intimacy assault scandal while he was running for re-election. There are a whole bunch of things about the case that we only know because my family has known this politician's family for like 40 years. Some of my family members were interviewed by police, but the guy was found not guilty. To this day, my family thinks he did it. Story 92. Microplastics in the human body are already at concentrations that affect our mental and physiological abilities, and they make us more susceptible to other illnesses and cancers. This is only going to get worse in the coming decades. Story 93. Polyester clothing is a big factor in microplastics entering our bodies and drinking water. It will be an uphill battle to get anything done about it because big plastic, big oil. Story 94. That Elon somehow completely rigged this election, but the right spent 4 years complaining about the same thing, so now if anyone says this one was rigged, nobody will believe it, or you will seem crazy. Story 95. The free contact lens cases that come with the contact solution have gotten much larger in the last 30 years, encouraging you to use the solution up faster. Story 96. The drastic drop in violent crime in the 90s is because home video game systems became widely available. Story 97. That every drive-through car wash option is the same, whether you pick the basic one or the most expensive one. Story 98. Processed sugars are responsible for the uptick in psychological disorders in children, like autism and ADHD. We are learning that the gut bacteria microbiome in children with those disorders are markedly different than neurotypical children. The gut microbiome begins forming in infancy and is dramatically altered by foods and medications that the child takes. Answer. My son has ADHD, dyslexia dysgraphia. His dad and dad's brother have reading disorders, and I suspect ADHD. Grandfather also had a reading disorder. Not only does this suggest a genetic component, but it casts doubt on modern environmental factors as a cause. So, Grandpa was born in 1920. I think you've got a case here of correlation does not equal causation. The microbiome could be different in neurodivergent people because they are neurodivergent, rather than them being neurodivergent because of their microbiome. Story 99. American elections are bought by large corporations. They endorse those who boost their profit margins more. The election process was never about democracy or truth. Can't necessarily prove, but it makes sense. Story 100. That before plastics, as in bags, packaging, like everything in the world now comes wrapped in some form of plastic or styrofoam, we had so less cancers. So less. Years ago, you got your fish and chips in paper, your spuds, your cheeses, milk lemonade, beer Coke were all in glass bottles. Then they invented plastic the world, and its occupants are fudge. Answer. I think it's a little restrictive to pinpoint it to plastics. What about we had so much less cancer before all the nuclear bombs, the nuclear testing, Chernobyl and Fukushima blowing up? You could just as easily blame the fact that everyone drives a car now, not just a fortunate few. What about processed foods or added sugars? There is so much that changed in our world. Yeah, plastic is definitely not great, but I really doubt it's the worst culprit out there. Story 101. That our understanding of the universe is completely wrong. That what we experience as the universe is just the inside of some kind of being. The Big Bang was the being coming to life. Suns, stars, etc. are just the red-white blood cells. Humanity of just a growing illness or cancer-like size. All the empty space in space is just the empty space in between atoms and all that. The universe is growing and expanding because the being is getting bigger. We can't see beyond the edge of the universe because there's nothing there besides this being's skin. An image of the observable universe taken with an X-ray looks very similar to a brain. Maybe I need to find some friends. Story 102. Samsung purposefully reduced the power of their phone's vibration from the S10 onwards in order to sell the Galaxy Watch for missed notifications. Story 103. Certain shock jocks and controversial figures are being funded by anti-Western groups to cause disunity and undermine the strength of Western countries. Certain individuals who seem to have no real job outside of courting controversy always seem to have enough money to go on holiday. Story 104. Pomegranates aren't real. I mean, in a sense they are, but I think they went extinct many hundreds or perhaps 1,000 years ago. But instead of admitting they went extinct, they were replaced by another item that we now call pomegranates. Story 105. Big Pharma have cures for some stuff, but they make more money selling their current substances than selling the cures. Story 106. A lot of people are in jail for crimes they did not commit when the actual culprit roams free. My suspect is that the percentage of this is much higher than people think, especially in developing countries. Story 107. That maybe there is more to coincidental happenings than just coincidence. For example, someone you haven't spoken to for a long while crosses your mind, and shortly afterwards you receive a call or text from them. Another example, you learn a word or phrase and then come across it 2 or 3 times in the next week. WTAF? Story 108. That the sudden uptick in spot fires all over SECA are somehow being executed by the insurance companies. No, I'm not a climate change denier. I get that part, but hang in there with me. CDF redraws the fire severity maps every year and includes all the year's previous fires that create a circumference around the fire approx. 20 to 25 miles in a circle around that fire. If you live within that new radius, you're screwed. The insurance companies use those maps to justify cancellations. I'm just saying, with all the random spot fires popping up all over CA, like I've never seen before. The whole freaking southern part of the state will soon be under a fire severity area and justified to either raise or cancel your insurance. I know I sound like a nut job, but with every random spot fire that was popping up this season, I kept thinking, darn, that's another insurance black hole. Story 109. I believe there is a group of ruling elite that sit around in a smoky room deciding all world events and determining the course of history. With today's tech, they are probably all over the world, checking in on screens, all around a huge theoretical table. However it transpires, I believe the fate of the world and its people is determined by a surprisingly small group of people. Story 110. Quantum entanglement is real. You can influence an outcome with your thoughts due to acknowledging an atom, physics shoot. Story 111. A huge amount of instigating comments on Reddit are not from real people, but from paid actors with an agenda. Story 112. Writing, reading, and speech are processed in entirely different areas of the brain, and as a result, confusing the spelling of homophones, such as your and your, there, and there, is not in any way indicative of a lack of intelligence, particularly in a language as irregular in its spelling rules as English is. Story 113. Transom windows are pushed by window makers because they can use otherwise waste glass to sell an otherwise useless window. Nobody actually likes them because they're positioned too high for standard curtains to cover them. Story 114. In Austria, there are these big furniture stores, XX Lutz, Mbelix, MX, etc. They got a lot of pretty well-made advertisement on TV, magazines, and so on. Then they have huge stores all around the country. Most of them not nearly have enough traffic as IKEA. No idea how they afford any of that. I can't proof it, but I suspect some kind of foul play, calling them Mbel Mafia for years. Story 115. All the fuss, marriages, breakups, and stuff in Hollywood is all scripted and part of a huge show in itself. Strategic relationships and breakup and scripted controversy to support movie marketing and also distract general public from the shady stuff. Story 116. That the voting machines in the 2024 United States presidential election were hacked, and that the Democrats that know are keeping their mouths shut either to prevent a civil war or to ensure a landslide in the midterm and next presidential election cycles. Story 117. That the audio quality for the Kendrick Lamar halftime show broadcast was intentionally poorer than it should have been, so Fox could get audiences at home to whine about the woke black guy. The recorded version I heard on Spotify yesterday completely changed my entire perspective on the show. It was phenomenal. Answer: I never have to turn my TV volume higher than 25, 35 at the absolute highest. During the halftime show, I had it all the way to 60 and it didn't seem to get any louder. I even made the comment out loud. As soon as the game came back on, the TV was screaming at me again. No one was yelling along with the TV, and it was only 3 of us, so no loud talking over each other and such. Story 118. That Elon Musk used Starlink to alter votes in several key areas to help Trump win the election. Now Trump is paying Elon back by putting him in charge of Doge. I mean, just look at the fact that he shared a conference from the Oval Office today with Elon and gave Elon the floor to speak. Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire, now has a huge role in our government. Why? Why would Trump grant that power to someone other than his family? Story 119. That my landlord eliminate her husband been freaking me out for 2 years now, and I am finally moving, so I feel like I can talk about it. Story 120. Elon Musk has never actually had intimacy. All of his kids were created via IVF, and I can't imagine a woman letting that man lay on them like a grunting pile of laundry while simultaneously thinking, let's make little versions of this. Story 121. That when someone dies, they immediately go into their next slightly altered timeline. There is no afterlife or reincarnation per se, just a long, drawn-out progression of timelines. Story 122. That Luigi Mangione fully intended to get away with take down the United Healthcare CEO, but was caught by authorities that used some sort of IT surveillance tool that was able to pinpoint his location. I imagine such a tool is illegal and not admissible in court, so the workaround is to have someone call in with an anonymous tip so that local authorities have probable cause to investigate. Law enforcement has been doing these types of dirty tricks for decades. San Francisco police forwarded his missing person photo to the FBI, and the very next day, a random anonymous McDonald's customer told a worker that he looked like the shooter even though the missing person photo wasn't public at the time, and he was wearing a mask and beanie in the McDonald's. He was on his personal laptop and connected to public Wi-Fi when he was caught. Once the authorities had his name, DOB, and address, they could easily have got the MAC address IP of his personal laptop and were just waiting for him to come online with it. Once his trial is all said and done, I fully expect there to be interviews with the customer who spotted him and then worker who phoned it in, and I would be willing to bet that person has ties with law enforcement. Story 123. I suspect that we're most likely alone in universe. I can't prove it because it's a complicated thing. Also, the paradox of not seeing aliens is called Fermi paradox. Some hypotheses are really interesting. Story 124. Dark matter is merely a mathematical convenience and does not in fact exist in any appreciable amount. Story 125. This is sort of my own salty thing, bear with me. One day at work, I hadn't brought lunch, so I decided to get Uber Eats from a McDonald's that I could literally walk to in 5 minutes if I wanted to. I gave instructions to the driver and left it for about 5 minutes. Then 10 minutes, then 20 minutes. I think, okay, maybe the McDonald's is slow. I checked the app and it said the driver had my order and was heading to my location. Cool, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. I messaged the driver asking where my food was, and I get coming as a reply. An hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 25 minutes. I decide to watch the map since my boss had let me take a break. As I'm watching the map and watching this guy's car go over a nearby bridge about 5 times, going back and forth and around and around and back and forth until I say fudge it and cancel the order. The next day I watched the news and saw that at roughly the same time on the same bridge, someone was driving under the influence and driving over traffic islands, over the sides of people's cars, across lanes, all of that sort of stuff. So I suspect that was my Uber driver. Story 126. YouTube Mobile knows when both my hands are busy and can't skip an ad. Every single time when doing my skincare, the moment both my hands get wet, an ad pops up on my phone. Same when doing the dishes. And I know I sound crazy when I say it. Story 127. The anti-social media attitudes that became prevalent in the mid-2010s are being promoted behind the scenes by some combination of governments and big businesses. They're the ones with the most to lose if people have such a potent way to organize, and getting the most socially engaged folks off social media makes it less useful for this purpose. Story 128. China having concentration camps. Well, to be fair, I don't suspect it, I know it, but still can't prove it, and I'm not going to try to ha-ha. Story 129. I got a specific one, but that there is no global economy or stock market or whatever. The governments don't have money, it's data, and they use that to trade. I could get mad weird with that, so we'll end it there. Story 130. The TV show Inside Job was canceled because one of the conspiracy theories was secretly true. Okay, suspect is a strong word, but the idea amuses me, and I certainly can't prove it. Answer. A novel I read led me to my favorite conspiracy theory that your comment reminded me of. Basically, there are some true conspiracy theories out there, but they intentionally spread more to disguise the real ones by making all of them seem more ridiculous and muddying the waters. I don't even have any theories in particular that I believe or could tell you who they are, but the idea is amusing. In the novel, there was a character who had been a spy and said all these crazy things, and another character explained she thought he did that on purpose. So if he accidentally said something true, it would just seem like another of his crazy little factoids. I guess this is also like the episode of The Office where Michael spreads a bunch of rumors after he accidentally shared a secret. Story 131. Similar to the mattresses plan, I think rug stores are in some way a front. They never have customers in there. They have closing down sales just about every weekend. And every time I've entered one, the supposed sales assistant has had no interest in me at all. Even when I asked about something specific, it was greeted with a vague, "Oh, I think they're over there if we've got any," which, considering I was the only customer I've ever seen in there, I thought was a questionable response. Story 132. The block universe theory seems so intuitively correct. Also the many worlds theory, but I'm no physicist and intuition amounts to nothing in science. Story 133. I believe in magic, not like frou-frou magic, but I've seen and experienced things that have been completely unexplainable. I know things intuitively about people I straight up shouldn't know. I've spoken to the dead in dreams that have told me things I later found out to be true, and I shouldn't have known it. I've seen things fly across the room and break. I've tested theories such as reading people's minds, and I was right. IDK, maybe I'm a psychopath or something. Maybe I should be locked in a padded room forever. But honestly, it's just my theory. I'm not hurting anyone. I enjoy being spiritual. It's my life. I will believe whatever I want. Story 134. When we were 5 and 6, respectively, my older brother made it very clear that he disliked, due to our close ages, that we shared friends. After we moved to a new school, I became very unpopular. The only people I could ever seem to make friends with were people he didn't want to be friends with. I've always suspected he would spread rumors and gossip about me to convince people not to like me. Story 135. That Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent and was paid to get dirt on all the celebrities and politicians to use for blackmail whenever needed. Story 136. My sister has a 54-year mission to destroy my happiness. If that's not her mission, it's one thing she's good at. Story 137. A local bar has the biggest Halloween party in town. 1,000 first prize, 100 second prize. The discrepancy between first and second prize was always weird for me. The winner is always some guy with insane movie quality costumes like The Predator. I'm convinced they have an agreement with a professional costume designer. Advertise 1,000 but pay him his regular fee. And no one can argue the fact that he won because the costumes are insane. Story 138. Phones are built to break after 2 years. Every phone I get, on the second-year anniversary, it just shoot the bed. In the past, it was that it wouldn't run apps correctly, but I think the normal updates to the different OS have improved that. My past 2 phones were battery life. Like clockwork, they'd stop holding a charge on 2 years. My current phone I will have for 2 years next month. The battery is going great. Everything runs perfectly on it, but something that has literally never happened on any of my other phones before. Screen burn in. Like, what the hell? It's always something every single time. Story 139. The murderer of John Benet Patricia Ramsey was none other than her kid brother and was covered up by her mother, potentially without her father's knowledge. Both parents insisted that the family was asleep all night, yet when police arrived, the mother was still wearing clothing and makeup from the day prior. And in the initial 911 call, you can hear what sounds like a young child frantically apologizing to a parent. Edit. Refreshing my memory, yeah, the brother 100 did it. I'd forgotten that he'd previously put his sister in the ER and that she had pre-mortem injuries that matched being hit and even stabbed with his toys. There is a very good documentary by Matt Orchard on YouTube that covers all of the evidence and theories. Story 140. That people simply do not want to be argued with. Sure, everyone will say, oh no, I like people who challenge me. But everyone just wants to be agreed with and nothing more. Story 141. That my grandson's mother's new boyfriend is harmful behavior him. I can't prove it because the child is not able to name people. Story 142. That the future is predetermined and free will is an illusion. We are traveling forward in the time dimension, but what we are traveling into already exists. It isn't created on the go. Story 143. Dark matter and the Great Wall of Space colonization is the same. Many small black holes populate space. Story 144. That high use of plastics are damaging human egg sperm, leading to declining birth rates in highly developed countries. Story 145. That women secretly dislike those non-cotton artificial fiberless Cinetech bras, thongs, and up in your crotch panties, and would rather wear those good old cotton granny panties and breathable bras instead. Story 146. Boris Johnson did not have COVID when he was pictured being wheeled through the hospitals. That time he apparently had COVID. I believe it was all a publicity stunt. Story 147. I suspect there is a plane of existence over the top of this one that we as humans just can't see or experience. Like if there are colors we can't see waves doing their thing, who's to say there isn't another layer of something? I am nowhere close to being a scientist, and I'm definitely not going to ascend like religious experiences. Just hard to believe that what we experience and measure is everything. Story 148. Something is off about Mr. Beast, but I can't pinpoint it. He has weird vibes and I think something will come to light at some point. Never liked him. Story 149. That teacher dislikes students that are dumb. Like, do you have to sigh every time you have to help me? If there are any teachers reading this, please admit it. Story 150. There's a cure for baldness, but companies are making too much money on treatments and cosmetic procedures for the cure to be brought to market. Story 151. I am surprised I haven't heard people suggest this. I don't think a MacD employee called the cops on Luigi. I think the FBI used methods that they won't disclose to track him and use that as a cover. The local police may have been called, but it wasn't a MacD employee that recognized him and made the call. Story 152. I sincerely don't believe that any privacy settings actually work. Refuse access to my microphone? Then why am I getting pizza ads after talking about not knowing what to make for dinner in your app? Story 153. That my cousin eliminate her husband after their house burned down. The speed in which she immediately got with someone else, and pregnant afterwards, was suspect to me at the time. Answer, I suspect my cousin burned his house down. He and his wife moved out to Washington for a job she took. He had a hard time finding work in his field and was taking odd jobs for years which he disliked. He wanted to move back to Illinois to be near his parents and siblings. She was the breadwinner and had a great job. Neither had any job available in Illinois. About 2 years ago, their car caught fire at night. 2 days later, their house burned entirely down. There is footage of the arsonist from a Ring camera. A hooded person runs up to the porch at about 2 a.m. and douses the porch with gasoline, then lights a match and throws it on the gasoline. The whole thing goes up in seconds. It's scary how fast the entire house catches fire. Anyway, my cousin's wife was terrified someone was out to get them and trying to eliminate them, so she agreed to move to Illinois to get away from Washington state. I don't know how no one has suspected my cousin. The hooded figure is the same size and shape as him, and they lived in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors for miles. They had no friends in WA. They kept to themselves. There were no other similarly related arsons before or after it happened. Story 154. Tom Cruise doesn't do his own stunts. I don't believe that he's an amazing helicopter pilot, climber, can fly a jet, blah, blah, blah. He belongs to a cult which encourages lying. It's not that much of a stretch. Answer. I'm going to sound crazy full of myself, but by the end, I hope it's clear the point I'm trying to make is actually the opposite. I'm a nobody, and I do this stuff anyways. I'm a skydiver, base jumper, paraglider pilot, have done a bunch of wingsuit base jumps. I design and build parachute equipment for a living. It would take too long to list specifics, but the list of stunts and shenanigans I've gotten into over the last 15 years would need to be written on a cartoonishly long scroll. Hundreds of skydives, hundreds of base jumps, thousands of paragliding flights, and I'm just some 33-year-old guy that makes like 40, 50,000 a year, and I've managed to pull all of that off. I have tons of friends in these sports, this community that have all of those accomplishments, and they are also fixed-wing pilots, flight instructors, commercial airline pilots, fly fighter jets, build their own airplanes, acrobatic pilots, helicopter pilots, hot air balloon pilots. They've either done dozens of motorcycle base jumps or built a human slingshot that shoots people 1,000 in the air. Again, it's just just a massive list of stunts and shenanigans, and all of us are pretty normal people that work regular people jobs. Now imagine what Tom Cruise could do with Tom Cruise money and free time if he had even the slightest interest in flying airplanes, helicopters, skydiving, base jumping, etc., which he clearly does. Honestly, I think you need to look at it from a different perspective. Quite frankly, the stunts Tom Cruise does really aren't all that challenging or difficult, and anyone could learn the skills to do them if they wanted to and had the resources. A lot of his stunts are just things like a bog standard night skydive. If you're not involved in the kind of stuff he's doing, it seems like what he's doing is insane. But like, for example, that stunt he did where he rode a motorcycle off a ramp cliff to a base jump. I or any of my friends could go do that tomorrow with literally zero preparation, and it wouldn't even be the craziest thing I've done in the last year. I mean, hell, for like $1,500, you could go to a drop zone this weekend and learn how to skydive and make your first skydive ever solo if you felt like it. My dirtbag friend that lives in his van and sells plant substance for a living has done cooler stunts than Tom Cruise has. So yeah, I think Tom Cruise with millions of dollars and a studio backing him and paying for all of it does his own stunts. Story 155. There's an assisted living facility in my town that I'm convinced is a money laundering scheme. It was opened in 2023, but I've never seen a single person there. With the curtains wide open, all the rooms are empty. There's maybe at most 5 cars ever there. Majority of the time there are 0. And the sign has been up that it's been leasing since fall of 23, and anyone that recruits someone to join gets 3 months free rent. I know places do that, but this just seems weird. Story 156. You know when you pump a specific dollar amount of gas? When it gets close to the dollar amount, you chose the amount of gas coming out of the hose slows, but the price keeps going up at the same speed as it did at the start. The gas stations could make a few extra bucks that way. Answer: the pump shows how much was pumped and how much it charged you. You can do the math to make sure it charged the right amount for the ones pumped. If it's ever off, there's probably a government agency near you that would love to hear about it. If you suspect that the pump is lying about how much gas is being pumped, you should voice those concerns to that same government agency. Story 157. That Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame member Patrick Chapin had that witness in his substances trafficking trial takedown. Story 158. If a term is even, the next term is one half of it. If a term is odd, the next term is 3 times the previous term plus 1. The conjecture is that these sequences always reach 1, no matter which positive integer is chosen to start the sequence. Story 159. The NFL is scripted. Frozen was made to keep people from looking for Walt Disney's frozen head. I don't fit my company's vision, which is why I haven't gotten a promotion, but keep getting promises of one. Story 160. There is no gods, just humans coming up with things to help with daily life troubles and not wanting to accept there's nothing after all this. Story 161. Plant substance eliminate products also contain tiny plant substance seeds which are immune to the product, so it does a great job clearing your existing weeds. But newer, stronger weeds come back the following year, so you think, oh, I should get that plant substance killer. It did a great job last year. Story 162. That the American people didn't actually vote for Donald Trump in droves, IDK. There's something weird about it to me, and I believe that's the hold Elon Musk has on Trump. But if I say it aloud, then I sound just like the 2020 stolen election people. Crazy. Answer: it's nowhere near concrete evidence, but I feel like MAGA screaming about how 2020 was a rigged election is enough to be live. They pulled some shady shoot in 2020 from. Republicans project harder than a goddarn IMAX theater. So for them to claim the Democrats cheated the last election only to do it for real themselves seems 110 in character for them. The whole thing with Elon seeming to have a boot on Donald's neck seems to prove it more. Like, you can't tell me a man as psychotically egotistic as Trump is would let someone walk all over him like Elon has been. See the latest news about Elon being the Oval Office spokesperson, while Trump just sits there. I think if there were still checks and balances in place, there'd be an investigation that'd find all sorts of shady shoot. But sadly, the powers that be are too sycophantic to ever touch that Pandora's box. Story 163. I suspect Facebook, Instagram, etc. are listening in on your microphone and using casual phrases you say to friends and family to send you targeted advertisements. But I can't prove it. Story 164. The introduction of Roe v. Wade in the States played a role in crime dropping decades after the bill was introduced. I am aware that Bill Clinton passed the crime bill in 1994, but I have a feeling that this could have also played a part.